What's up, guys? DK here with Collector's Impact, and today we're going to have a nice candid discussion on the topic of taking profit. Now, this is an investment concept that reaches far and wide into the realm of investments, whether that be stocks, bonds, real estate, or collectibles, or anything of that nature. Anything that involves buying and selling, taking profits is a very key philosophical thing to understand and appreciate. Now, since this is a collectibles channel, I'm going to focus, obviously, primarily on the collectibles aspect of this, but the rules do apply to things like stock as well. But as a general rule, we're talking about cards, comics, things of that nature. And I'll go ahead and also say this is not financial advice. I'm just a dude on YouTube. This is entertainment. We're talking about cards and Pokemons and Pikachus and stuff here. We're not so just know that this is not financial advice. This is for entertainment purposes only. Now, let's go ahead and jump into it. Now, I would say when it comes to collectibles and stuff of that nature, the main goal, in my perspective at least, when it comes to taking profits, is to maintain your hobby or your investment within a reasonable cost window for your lifestyle. Is goal number one, with the caveat of making some actual profit as well if you can. Now, this is simply from the standpoint of taking profits. That's different from actually making profits. Do you understand? Let's jump into point number two, which is that very few people can actually time the market perfectly. In fact, it's pretty much impossible to time a market perfectly, whether we're talking MetaZoo, Pokemon, Magic, or freaking stocks. I mean, look at GameStop. Look at all these things, you know? It's very hard to time to sell right at the peak and buy right at the bottom. But you know what's not as hard to do is to be able to calculate mathematically when you are in the green zone of profit. Now, what that means to you can differ from person to person. As a general rule, when you're talking about profit taking, it's usually 10% or more would be considered taking some profit. And that's after all fees, everything associated. You make 10% or more on your investment. That's considered a window for taking profit. I personally have a stronger window than that when it comes to collectibles, just because there's so much hassle involved in the collectible space that a 10% profit really isn't worth it in a lot of ways. I'll just throw that out there. Again, not financial advice, entertainment. Just saying. General rule in the world, 10% or more. Profit-taking zone. My rule, probably 50% or more. But the point is, you may know in your heart of hearts that something like, say, a first edition Cryptid Nation box has the potential to go to the moon. You just don't know when that is going to happen. But if you bought this box for, say, $200, and now you can turn around and sell it for, say, $800, well, you know, there you go. You 4x'd your money, essentially. Probably 3x after the fees and everything, but you know what I'm saying. That's a huge return on investment. That's a huge amount. All right, so moving on to point three. Knowing what to sell is more important than knowing when to sell. So, yeah, this is what I mean when you really got to circle back to goal number one of profit taking versus profit making. Goal number one, of course, being to maintain your hobby within a reasonable cost window for your lifestyle. It's really key. So, in terms, going back to number three, knowing what to sell is more important than knowing when to sell it. So, if an item does not qualify as something that is innately collectible, that has extreme potential in the space for collectability, and I would define that as something that's extremely limited, something that's extremely iconic, something that's extremely desired, or something that is fundamental to a hobby, to the hobby itself that you're involved in, if your item does not qualify in those categories, then it's not inherently collectible within the space, and therefore knowing what to sell is more important than knowing when to sell it. So, for example, VMAX Pikachu here. This is a good example card. So this comes from the Celebration set. Obviously, it's not the sealed product. This is just one card from within the set. This card can fluctuate all up and down the spectrum in terms of where the profit can be made. Like right now, you can get these for around $5. So if one day you buy a bunch of these for $5 and then they go up to $25, you know, there's your window to make some decent profit, do some profit taking. simply because this card does not fit those characteristics. It's not extremely limited. It is limited, but it's not extremely limited. They're available. It's not iconic. It's not extremely desired or fundamental to the hobby. This would fall into a different realm, which is very important to knowing what to sell, which is simply if it's hype, speculation, FOMO, or shiny and new. This definitely qualifies as the shiny and new category, as well as those other things too. Those are things to really take into consideration more when you're thinking about a certain item to sell. And that's also not to say that an item can't possess all of these characteristics. That's where the fun of the collectibles market really comes into play. Because if you're looking at MetaZoo here, for example, this one's a good example just because of how relevant and how new and everything. Since this is the very first edition, right? It's the very first edition item, the very first set, other than the Kickstarter stuff, you guys know. But this is the first set, first edition launch. There's only 25,000 of these boxes. It is limited. It is iconic in terms of the actual MetaZoo branding. Whether or not MetaZoo is iconic in the world of collectibles as a whole is a different argument. But in terms of its own hobby space, it's iconic. It's desired. There will always be a desire for this so long as MetaZoo continues to be an important game. And it is fundamental to the hobby as it is the first edition, first launch set. So there's those characteristics, but it's also very hype-driven, very speculative. There's a ton of FOMO, and it's shiny and new. So you have every single characteristic. So this is really just to hammer that point home of number 3. Knowing what to sell is more important than knowing when to sell it. So this one is really, really, really hard to determine if it's ready or ripe to sell versus not in the moment. So that is going to come up later in the discussion. Point number 4, the risk tolerance. This is really important when it comes to taking profits or making profits and your overall objective behind the actions that you're doing. So, for example, I'm a moderately risk-tolerant person when it comes to my collectibles. I have a little bit of wiggle room to play with them some. In other words, if I was a very low risk tolerance type personality, then using the concept of taking profits is also interchangeable with the concept of making profits, because you could take profit every single time on your items. And that's how most of the trading card businesses or collectibles businesses in general, that's how they function. That's how they make their money. That's how they sustain themselves, is they take profit every single time that they can. So say that, you bought this you're a store, right? You bought this wholesale for, I'm just going to make up a number, $100 or whatever. You sold it to some Timmy for $150 as a business. You made profit. That's you taking profits on your item as a business. And if you do that every single time with every single item, you're in business. You're making money. That's how it works. That's how it is. So it really depends on where you fall on the scale of collector and why you're in the space in the first place as to your risk tolerance level, just to really put that in perspective. Because if you're the Timmy that bought that box for $150 and the store's like, yeah, I made $50 off this Timmy, now the box is worth $800. Timmy's pretty damn happy. Or it's very possible that Timmy sold the box to Jimmy for $250, and Timmy's like, yeah, I just made $100. And then Jimmy sold the box to Kimmy for $400, and he's like, yeah, I made $150. And then Kimmy sold the box to John for $600. You see what I'm saying? So there's always going to be a different level, and that's examples of real-time profit taking from each of the entities that possesses the item. And it's really like a game of hot potato as well. And that's where the risk tolerance comes into play, because depending on where you are in that cycle of a collectible's lifespan, it really determines how willing you are to participate in it with the risk tolerance level that you have. But if you're Mr. Richie Rich and you bought in at $150 and you just held as you watch Jimmy, Kimmy, Timmy, Billy, all these guys trade this item, they're the ones that they were dealing with, and you just held yours in the corner, and then all of a sudden it's worth $800 and you want to sell it, you just completely blew them out of the water in terms of the profit that you were able to make because your risk tolerance level was higher and you held on for longer. But again, that's more making profit, less taking profit. But let's wrap this all up with point number 5, guys. Playing with the house's money. is a key thing when it comes to a good way to reach your number one goal there, which is to maintain your hobby within a reasonable cost window for your lifestyle. Let's use the MetaZoo for example. Say you bought 4 boxes of these for $150. If you were that lucky, congratulations, big time. But yeah, let's say you bought 4 of these at $150 a piece. That would be $600 total investment. Now 1 box is worth $800. If you sell 1 box that you held on to because you had high risk tolerance and you wanted to hold because you had a gut feeling that it was going to go up, so you sell one at $800, you just made a ton of money off of the one sale, but in comparison to everything that you bought, you now basically covered the cost of all of those items and made profit. So now you're playing with the house's money, and you can reinvest that money into other items and then grow your collectibles and collection from there. That is the key reason that profit taking, knowing how to take your profits when they're there, is important, because it really reminds me of like a scene in Star Wars when the guy is like almost there, he's going to the Death Star, almost there, and they're like, pull up, almost there. And then what happened? They came from behind, poof, and he blows up because he overextended himself. He didn't listen. He thought he was going to make it, and then poof, it fell apart. And that's what can happen with your collectibles if you don't actually take some profits every now and then. And again, that comes down to point number 4 too, and your risk tolerance level, your strategy, your overall objectives and everything. But that's why the concept of taking profits is so important and knowing how to do it. Key takeaway: greed can lead to defeat. The human condition is quite real, guys, and that's one of those things, the 7 deadly sins. It's one of the ones that often gets people. So knowing how to take profit is a pretty key thing when it comes to investing. Anyway, thank you guys for coming by and checking out this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, as it greatly helps with the channel. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, as well as, of course, just fun random videos of like grade reveals, pack openings, things of that nature, and other discussions on collectibles topics, of course, definitely subscribe to the channel. Would greatly appreciate that. It is free. Anyway, thank you very much again for coming by. I really do appreciate that, guys. And I hope to see you again next time. Take care.